God's word is not just an inspired word to us, it's also a historic document. Now, why is that important to remember? Because it's about real people in real places facing real situations, much like you and I may face as well. It's not a story that's set in some faraway land, in some make believe world where we're just left to try to tease out maybe some kind of moral to a story. Everything took place in history. So we're going to begin a new series today that we're looking at these group of 15 psalms that are called the Songs of Ascent. Every psalm in the Bible that we have is a prayer or a song of celebration. Every song has something behind it. Every prayer has a person behind it. They are real people that were experiencing incredible pain that they turned into prayer, or they were experiencing a longing or a celebration that they turned into worship. And that's what we need to remember. So before we look at these psalms, I want to look at the historical setting to these songs of ascent. So I want to take you back to Second Chronicles. Let me set the stage before I begin reading here. We're going to read the very last words in Second Chronicles. Second Chronicles is recording for us the history of Israel and Judah, which is a sad history. It's people that know better. They're people that have experienced God's provision, and yet they continually slide away. Even when there's a time of revival, they don't quite come all the way back to God, and they don't stay there as long as before, and they begin to drift away again. And so here's how the book of Second Chronicles begins to wrap up. I'm going to start in verse number 15. The Lord, the God of their fathers, sent word to them through his messengers again and again, because he had pity on his people and on his dwelling place. But they mocked God's messengers, despised his words, and scoffed at his prophets, until the wrath of God was aroused against his people, and there was no remedy. He brought up against them the king of the Babylonians, who killed their young men with the sword in the sanctuary, and spared neither young man nor young woman, old man or aged. God handed all of them over to Nebuchadnezzar. He carried to Babylon all the articles from the temple of God, both large and small, and the treasures of the Lord's temple, and the treasures of the king and his officials. They set fire to God's temple and broke down the walls of Jerusalem. They burned all the palaces and destroyed everything of value there. It says here that it finally got to a tipping point. Their rebellion against God came to the place where God said, I need to get your attention, and I'm going to carry you away from your homeland for this time of exile. Now, in the prophet Jeremiah, we read words that are written right at the close of this, just as Nebuchadnezzar is coming in. And then we continue to read what Jeremiah is writing to these exiles that have been taken away to Babylon. And in their exile, there is instructions for them. There's also a promise for them as well. There's numerous promises, but I want to focus on this one that Jeremiah records for us in the 29th chapter. This is what the Lord says. When 70 years are completed for Babylon, keep that in mind. When 70 years are completed for Babylon, I will come to you and fulfill my gracious promise to bring you back to this place. He's talking about Jerusalem. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. Then you will call upon me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. I will be found by you, declares the Lord, and will bring you back from captivity. I will gather you from all the nations and places where I have banished you, declares the Lord, and I will bring you back to the place from which I carried you into exile. So there's built in right in here this promise of how long this punishment is going to take place. When 70 years are completed for Babylon. 70 years then as well are completed for the Israelites that are carried there. Now, what's going to happen at the end of these 70 years? Well, God is going to use a historic change, a monumental change. Now, here's Babylon. It's a powerful nation, powerful enough that Nebuchadnezzar called himself King of Kings. He said, even other kings bow down to me. I am an unstoppable force, and comes all the way across to destroy Jerusalem and carry the people away. Now, who would think that at that point that anybody could oppose Nebuchadnezzar, and that in just 70 short years, his kingdom would fall and a new king would come on the scene that is going to do something unheard of, unexpected. Let me go back to Isaiah now. Isaiah, before a man is even born, a particular man that God is going to use, God already calls him by name. Listen to this. This is the closing words of the 44th chapter of Isaiah, and then we're going to go into just right into the beginning words of chapter 45. Who says of Cyrus, he is my shepherd. This is God speaking. Who says of Cyrus, he is my shepherd, and will accomplish all that I please. This is what God is saying about him. He will say of Jerusalem, let it be rebuilt, and of the temple, let its foundations be laid. Now we go right into chapter 45. This is what the Lord says to his anointed. This is what he calls Cyrus, his anointed, to Cyrus, whose right hand I take hold of, to subdue nations before him, and to strip kings of their armor, to open doors before him, so that gates will not be shut. I will go before you and level the mountains. I will break down gates of bronze and cut through bars of iron. I will give you the treasures of darkness, riches stored in secret places. Why? Listen, this is still God speaking about Cyrus, so that you may know that I am the Lord, the God of Israel, who summons you by name. For the sake of Jacob, my servant, of Israel, my chosen, I summon you by name and bestow on you a title of honor, though you do not acknowledge me. I am the Lord, and there is no other. Apart from me, there is no God. I will strengthen you, though you have not acknowledged me, once again, so that from the rising of the sun to the place of its setting, men may know there is none beside me. I am the Lord, and there is no other. And just to make it clear, one more verse a little bit later on in chapter 45, I will raise up Cyrus in my righteousness. I will make all his ways straight. He will rebuild my city. Listen to those words. He will rebuild my city and set my exiles free, but not for a price or reward. So 70 years later, this is what God foretells is going to happen. Now, let's go back to this historical account again. In 2 Chronicles, we just ended where it says that Nebuchadnezzar set fire to the temple, carried all the people off, carried all of the articles off. Verse number 20 of 2 Chronicles 36, he carried into exile to Babylon the remnant who escaped from the sword, and they became servants to him and his sons until the kingdom of Persia came to power. The land enjoyed its Sabbath rests. All the time of its desolation it rested until the 70 years were completed, listen, in fulfillment of the word of the Lord spoken by Jeremiah. That's what we just read in Jeremiah chapter 29. In the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, so we just read in Isaiah 44 and 45, in order to fulfill the word of the Lord spoken by Jeremiah, the Lord moved the heart of Cyrus, king of Persia, to make a proclamation throughout his realm and to put it in writing. This is what Cyrus, king of Persia, says. Listen carefully. The Lord, the God of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth. Again, that's what we read in Isaiah 44 and 45 there. And he has appointed me to build a temple for him at Jerusalem in Judah. Any one of his people among you, may the Lord his God be with him, and let him go up. Now that is a key phrase there. Let him go up. The reason why is because, physically speaking, Jerusalem is 2,500 feet above sea level. There is a physical climb to go from the valleys down here to go up to Jerusalem. And so Cyrus is saying that in a literal physical sense. If anybody wants to go back to Jerusalem, I'm going to free you from your captivity, and I'm going to resource you to go up to Jerusalem. And what are these group of 15 Psalms called? Starting in Psalm number 120, they're called the Songs of Ascent. Songs that pilgrims sang as they literally went up. But it's painting another picture for us as well. Not just the physical picture, but the spiritual picture of as well. You know, sometimes we use a phrase, living according to God's standard. We call it upright living. I'm living uprightly. It's not coincidental that that word up is in there, climbing up into God's presence. Before all of these events took place, look what Solomon noted in Proverbs chapter 15. The way of life winds upward for the wise, that he may turn away from hell below. See, he understands that as well, that we want to keep our focus and our gaze and our momentum upward, because if we don't, down below, it's hell. So let's look at this very first song of ascent. These are songs that the exiles sang, that the pilgrims sang year after year as they went back to Jerusalem to celebrate the different feasts. Now, I've shared with you before that Hebrew literature is written differently than we think of it in our Western world. A lot of our Western stories or poems or songs have sort of the payoff at the end. They kind of have that building to the lesson, or the final climax is at the end. In the Hebrew literature, it's in the middle. So we have this 120th Psalm that's 7 verses long, which means verse 4 is the middle verse. So I want to look at the second part of this as well, first of all, okay? Because it starts off with these words, woe to me. And you say, well, wait a minute. King Cyrus just said, anybody that wants to go back to Jerusalem, I'm releasing you from your captivity, and I'm going to help even pay for the reconstruction of the temple. What if you're ascending up, the first song of ascent, why would you say, woe to me? Well, it's not where they're going, it's where they're coming from that they're saying woe to. Listen to this. Woe to me that I dwell in Meshach, that I live among the tents of Kedar. Too long have I lived among those who hate peace. I am a man of peace, but when I speak, they are for war. So the song here is talking about the dark forces that are down below. Remember, Solomon said, the way for the wise winds upward to keep them from going down to hell. So they're saying there's some dark forces that are holding me back. And there's 2 of them that are mentioned here, Meshach and Kedar. So again, these are historical people, historical places. Meshach is a group of people that lived to the north of Israel, and they were known for how vile they were, how heartless they were in subduing anybody that they felt was opposed to them. The prophet Ezekiel especially talks about them, and let me show you a couple of things that will just point out how vicious these people are. First of all, he writes this, Greece, Tubal, and Meshach did business with you. He's speaking of the nation of Tyre here. Now notice what happened. They traded human beings and articles of bronze for your wares. In other words, long before we have the phrase right now, we'll call it human trafficking. That's what was going on. These people were selling, they traded human beings for other goods. They viewed humans as just pieces of property that could be sold to get what they really wanted. That's the people of Meshach. Look what else Ezekiel notes about them. Meshach and Tubal are there with all their hordes around their graves. All of them are uncircumcised, killed by the sword, because they spread their terror in the land of the living. They spread their terror in the land of the living. They were terrorists, and they trafficked in humans. And so you can understand why when they say, the song here says, woe to me that I live in Meshach. The name Meshach literally means drawn away or pulled back or held in a place that I don't want to be. And so that's why woe to me, because I live in Meshach. Well, what about this other one that not only Meshach, but I also live among the tents of Kedar. Kedar is a son of Ishmael. Now, you remember the story, Isaac and Ishmael are representative of two different things. Again, historic people, but they're telling, when we go to the New Testament, the Apostle Paul reminds us that they're telling a spiritual story as well. Ishmael represents Abraham trying to do things on his own power, using his smarts, using his brain. Isaac tells us how Abraham submitted to God, trusted God, had faith in God, and God did it his way. And so Kedar is a descendant of Ishmael, that idea of, I'm going to do it my way. I'm going to figure this out. These were also nomadic people. They didn't have a promised land like this land that the Jews had been exiled from and now were returning to. They didn't have that. They were nomadic. They just moved around, never at ease, never feeling secure. In fact, the name for Kedar literally means a dark place. So let's put those two together. Meshach and Kedar, we're talking about these forces that are drawing us away, dark forces, forces that terrorize us, forces that keep us in darkness, forces that keep us where we never feel at peace. And that's what it says here, is it says, I live among these places of Meshach and Kedar, and I'm a man of peace, and that's what I want, but they hate peace, and they just speak about war. And he says that, so the end of this song says, there's a dark place down below, and it has an incredible hold on me. And notice as well, in these verses 5, 6, and 7, there's no mention of God. Let me read that for you again. Woe to me that I dwell in Meshach, that I live among the tents of Kedar. Too long have I lived among those who hate peace. I am a man of peace, but when I speak, they are for war. It's almost like the song is saying, when I'm in those dark places, maybe it's because I am trying to do things. I have my eyes somewhere else, maybe in fear of these people who are around me. But remember, what's in the middle? Verse number 4. The middle verse is our key verse here. So look at verse number 4, because it's really a reminder to take my eyes off of the dark places of Meshach and Kedar and put my eyes somewhere else. The middle verse says that he is God, so God will punish you with a warrior's sharp arrows, with burning coals of the broom tree. Now think about this for a second. We just read these verses, these passages, where God says, here's what's going to happen. Nebuchadnezzar's going to come in. He's going to defeat you. He's going to take you into exile. You're going to be there for 70 years. At the end of 70 years, I'm going to raise up a man named Cyrus. Cyrus is going to release you and even help get you back to Jerusalem. And then all of those events took place. Now, just the history, so you know, it doesn't go right from Nebuchadnezzar to Cyrus. Nebuchadnezzar has some sons that aren't as strong as him. Slowly, the nation starts deteriorating. First, the Medes come in, and then the Persians come in. After that, this was a slow deterioration. It wasn't just went right from Nebuchadnezzar, and then Cyrus came in and said, I'm going to do something different. And so what this verse really tells us is, if God could say that he was going to do all of that ahead of time, and then we read it here, the historical records, it actually happens. When it actually comes about, doesn't that mean that God can take care of these people like Meshach and Kedar? Why do I have to put my eyes on them? Why do I have to try to make sure that punishment comes their way? This verse number 4 in the middle is reminding us that I don't have to do that. My job is to not figure out how they are going to be punished for trafficking in human possessions and their terrorism and their dark, nomadic, fear-inducing places. I don't have to do that. I'm going to let God take care of that. Well, the Bible tells us, as we read in here, the Bible does tell us how God is going to deal with them. First of all, let's look at what he has to say about these people of Meshach. Prophesy against him and say, this is what the sovereign Lord says. I am against you, Gog, chief princes of Meshach and Tubal. I will turn you around, put hooks in your jaws, and bring you out with your whole army, your horses, your horsemen fully armed, and a great horde with large and small shields, all of them brandishing their swords. It doesn't sound like God's struggling with this, does it? He says, here's what's going to happen. Just as surely as God says, Nebuchadnezzar is going to carry you away, Cyrus is going to come on the scenes and release you, just as surely as that took place, let me tell you what's going to happen with this terrorist group of Meshach. I'm going to just destroy them. I'm going to take care of them. So verse number 4, he will punish you with a warrior's sharp arrows, with burning coals of the broom tree. Sometimes God's punishment, though, as with the people of Israel that were taken into captivity, is to get their attention. Sometimes when God punishes, people realize we need to repent and we need to turn to God. That's what we see with these people of Kedar. Look what Isaiah records about them. All Kedar's flocks will be gathered to you. The rams of Nebaioth will serve you. They will be accepted as offerings on my altar, and I will adorn my glorious temple. Hear what God says about those people? They are going to come and join with you as you ascend, as you climb up into Jerusalem, as you go into God's presence to worship. These people of Kedar are going to go there as well. They're going to finally find a home. Remember, we said that they are nomadic people. They're just traveling around. There's no peace for them. There's no security for them. They're going to come and offer sacrifices right alongside you. And God says, and that's going to adorn my temple. My house is going to be a beautiful place because these people responded to the punishment and repented, and they joined in. So that's why verse number 4 in the middle, take my eyes off of the dark places that are down in the valley and put my eyes on God, who's at the end of my climb, the top of my climb. So now let me read for you. I want to read this psalm just a little bit differently. I want to read for you these closing 3 verses, then the middle verse, and then the opening 3 verses. I want you to hear how it flows like this. Woe to me that I dwell in Meshach, that I live among the tents of Kedar. Too long have I lived among those who hate peace. I am a man of peace, but when I speak, they are for war. He will punish you with a warrior's sharp arrows, with burning coals of the broom tree. I call on the Lord in my distress, and he answers me. Save me, O Lord, from lying lips and from deceitful tongues. What will he do to you? And what more besides, O deceitful tongue? You hear the change there? That he says, I could live in the valley among these dark places of Meshach and Kedar and feel trapped. But when I realize God's in control and he's going to punish them, then I can put my eyes on the Lord. I can call on him in my distress and he will answer me. See, what this is really saying here is as we go up, as we decide to leave these dark places, as we go up and we have our eyes on God, then he can shine his light on us. And as he shines his light on us, as we move out of the darkness and further into his presence, there's going to be some people, like the people of Meshach, that are going to entrench themselves, say, we're not going to give in. That's okay. God will take care of them. There's going to be other people like the people of Kedar that are going to say, hey, look at how God's light is shining on them. Let's go along with them into God's presence. And God says in Isaiah, that's how I'm going to adorn my house because of that. Now listen, going up is always effort. I mean, staying down is easy. I'm sitting in a chair right now. When I sit down in that chair, that's the easy part. It's effort to get up. And I told you that Jerusalem is 2,500 feet above sea level. It's effort to climb up there. In the spiritual life, there's effort as well, because there's a lot of things that would want to pull us into complacency. There's a lot of Meshachs and Kedars. I mean, think about it. This is the reason why I said that it's so wonderful that this has a historic setting. Because if it's that story that's just a make-believe story in some land far away once upon a time, I might have a hard time figuring out how to apply that to my life. But I don't know. Meshach, we said, is a dark place, a terrorist place, a place that views human life with disdain, just kind of treating it like property. The place of Kedar is a dark place. It's a nomadic place. It doesn't have any peace. It's constantly moving around, trying to find the next best thing. Does that sound at all like the culture we live in today? Sure does. And yet, what this Song of Ascent is telling us is to take our eyes off of those things and put our eyes on God and begin to move towards Him. When we do that, and like I said, it's effort. When we put that effort in, though, and we begin to climb up, then God can shine His glory on us. As we're continually going up into God's presence, that glorifies Him because we take our eyes off of everything else and just put our eyes on Him. It allows us to experience the rewards that He wants to give us. And as He rewards us, it gives a very easy to see witness and testimony to people that are living down in the valley to say, I want to go where they're going. I want my eyes to be where their eyes are so I can experience that. Well, that's exactly what Isaiah lays out for us in Isaiah chapter 60. He's talking about this future kingdom. Now, listen, let me read for you first. We already looked at this verse, but Isaiah chapter 60, verse 7 is the one about Kedar. Kedar's flocks will be gathered to you. The rams of Nebaioth will serve you. They will be accepted as offerings on my altar, and I will adorn my glorious temple. But let me back up to verse number 1. Arise, arise, go up, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord rises upon you. You hear the connection? As we arise, God's glory rises as well. See, darkness covers the earth, and thick darkness is over the peoples, down in that valley of Meshach and Kedar. But the Lord rises upon you, and His glory appears over you. Nations will come to your light, and kings to the brightness of your dawn. Lift up your eyes and look about you. All assemble and come to you. Your sons come from afar, and your daughters are carried on the arm. Then you will look and be radiant, and your heart will throb and swell with joy. The wealth on the seas will be brought to you. To you, the riches of the nations will come. Herds of camel will cover your lands. Young camels of Midian and Ephah, and all from Sheba will come, bearing gold and incense and proclaiming the praise of the Lord. Now, friends, that happens when we have our eyes up. And that's why I think that these songs of ascent, they're all grouped together there. I think that the reason why that they're there is because there are times that the climb is hard. There are times that we look back at those in the darkness and we begin to wonder, are they going to get away with their sin? What's God doing? They hurt me. They did bad things to me, and I want to see them punished for that. But you know, when Jesus came to earth for His public ministry, the very next chapter of Isaiah, chapter 61, He quotes that. And part of what He says is that He wants to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. And He stopped there. That's where He rolled up the scroll and said, this is fulfilled today. He left off the part that said, there's a day of judgment. It's not the time for judgment. And you and I aren't the judge. And so that's why when we keep our eyes on what's going on in Meshach and Kedar, there's no mention of God there, and there's no peace there. But when we say God can take care of this, just like He took care of all of this that He promised in history, Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, Persia, Cyrus, the return of the exiles, God took care of all of that. He can take care of everything else. My job, arise and shine, for my light has come. The glory of the Lord shines upon me. Nations see what is going on. When I keep my eyes on God, they want to be a part of it. Let me repeat it again. As long as we are continually climbing up, as long as we're singing these songs of ascent to each other as an encouragement to continue climbing up. When we're doing that, then God is glorified. We get to experience the blessings that he has for us, and our lives radiate the life and light of God, and it becomes this witness, this testimony to draw other people as well. Even people from the dark places like Meshach and Kedar will see the light, and they'll follow and come into God's presence along with us. So friends, that's why this song of ascent is intended to be an encouragement. Don't give in to the dark places. Don't stay trapped there. Don't keep your eyes there. Don't worry about what's going on there, but continue to go up into God's presence. Continue to keep your eyes on God. Continue to call to him and know that he will answer you, and let his light shine on you, and you will be a great testimony and witness for him. And you'll experience incredible rewards along the way as well. I pray that this is an encouragement to you, friends. As always, if you got questions, leave them as comments below or reach out to me in other ways. I'd love to be able to dialogue with you more about what it is to live in the light. God bless you, friends. I love you.